We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us try to be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, heading the clouds and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days. Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad, the show where we hunt down and expose Nephilim shit. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That's Top Lobster. And we are here today with Justin of Cryptids of the Corn. And before we get into it, is that all right, Top? Was that good, or do I still seem sleepy? Because I feel like I came out hot. Because you said something before we started. You said I look sleepy, and I found it very disrespectful because I feel very awake.
Here's the thing. All right, I'm sorry. This is not really a show, but so you were sleepy. He just said he ate a hoagie. I don't even know what a hoagie is. That was basically an entire turkey dinner, and he came on very like downtrodden. Justin, am I right?
I sounded like a good dinner to me.
No, it sounded great. It's just he was like very like tryptophaned out. So
I'm not taking sides while we're on air.
No, dude, that's a
long time ago.
Justin,
that's a myth,
right
by
now.
the way.
I'm
That's
gonna
a
make you
damn
pick,
myth.
Justin.
Well, thank you for having me on. I gotta go.
That's a myth, by the way, guys. Tryptophan's not a real fucking thing. Tryptophan's not a real fucking thing. Oh, I'm getting a lot of feedback all of a sudden. Why am I getting feedback? Yeah, unbelievable, dude. Come on. But yeah, so I'm not tired. Everything's good. We're here with Justin of Cryptids of the Corn. Justin, please introduce yourself. Tell the people what it is that you do, a little bit about the podcast, and where they can find your work.
Hey guys, I am Justin, aka the Great and Powerful Mystery. That just, I got called that for a long time. My co-host, his name's Jay. He was supposed to be here, but he's not able to. He got called into work a little early, so that's where he's at. I was a biologist, a fisheries biologist. So I was a field biologist out. I was the one that was getting dirty. We like to say Cryptids of the Corn is where scientific and magical thinking combine. You get a little science lesson with all the paranormal.
Beautiful.
And you find us everywhere.
Nice.
I think everywhere podcasts are found. I think so. I don't know. Jay normally does all that stuff.
Justin, I'm reliving your episode with Tony that I listened to. I was cutting my lawn and I was listening to you guys talk about this. And as you were like going through the field, I just listened. So now that I'm putting a face to it, it really rounds out this story for me. Like I really enjoy that story even more. Could you want to recap that for the people that don't know? Because a lot of people are like, who's Cryptids of the Corn? And I was like, yo, you guys suck. You don't know who Cryptids of the Corn is.
Which story with Tony?
I think you were talking about was it like the dudes with guns and
that one. Okay.
Oh, that one.
Now, so real quick, I was a fish biologist. We did fish surveys, complete surveys. So everything from like little tiny headwaters, which are like a foot wide, to the great big rivers. We used electroshocking gear. So sorry, my Wi-Fi is like really bad today for some reason. If you ever seen like people shock fish on TV and stuff like that, that's what I did for a living. I did all the math and the science behind it too. So what you do is you catch all the fish in a designated zone, and it gives you species and numbers and all this stuff. Basically, it gives you a river health score by the end of it, because there should be certain numbers of, everything from low-level feeders to higher level to apexes. But you had to do everything in the watershed, even if there's no fish present. So seriously, we'd do creeks that were 4 or 5 inches wide with no fish. But you have to do them to prove there's no fish. You can't just stop and look and be like, because there's stuff called like leaf starters, which they only live to be 1 year old, and they're like about that big. Yeah. And so they live their whole life cycles in these tiny streams. So they're very important though, because their offspring feeds stuff higher trophic level downstream. So these sites are either done every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, 5 years, or 7 years. Depending on what the survey is requiring, what kind of stuff you're testing to see if it's getting better or worse. Immediately, let's say like wastewater treatment or chemical plants, that kind of stuff. If they just put legislation on them or just put different restrictions on them, you're going to want to check it every year or every other year because you're trying to see if it's immediately getting better or getting worse or staying the same relatively quickly. For these surveys that are already like they're 20 years in and they kind of flatlined, they're stabilizing. You kind of dial back and you start doing those maybe every 7 years just to make sure there's not a problem going to occur, but you don't need to be out there. So most of the time when you do these 7-year surveys, the biology crew is completely different, even though it's the same company. Because, everybody's moving up, getting different jobs, all this stuff. So, the crew that did the 7 years before would leave you, it's called the field sheet. It tells you where the site is, the exact geo coordinates, where it starts, where it stops, and how to get there. And let's say there's keys or whatever. They're normally either taped to that in our lockbox, or they're in a lockbox and they tell you what number key it is. Because we're doing, we did surveys. We were from Ohio, but this was out in Illinois. I got to be careful, still in some NDAs. So trying to remember what I could talk about. But we did all over the country. So, these are, huge swaths of land. So this is a 7-year survey site, and it's a headwater site. So this stream's in the middle of a field. It's like nothing. Fish counting is lit though. Oh yeah. Yeah. We had one site that took 6 hours counting fish. So
our fans are brain dead. So sometimes we like to highlight that.
Love it.
So please continue.
No, we are doing this survey in a certain part of Illinois, and we've never done this survey before. It's a 7-year survey. So we just got to check all these sites one time. So it says you drive down this road and there's a big gate and then we have the key for it. We start driving down, this road is all grown over. It's thick, it's not really a road anymore. It's like a hidden drive. You can't see it unless you knew what you were going for, but we had the map. And we get to this gate that's all rusted over, grown over and stuff like that. And we have the key, pop the key in the lock, opens up, right? So we're like, okay, we're in the right spot. Because if it's hard to imagine that a key wouldn't work if you're not in the right spot.
Yeah. So
that gives you a little confidence. And it's on the back of what then, the 7 years prior to when we did this was a biology lab. So most of the time there's a company we pay to alert people who are going to be doing the survey. Sometimes they don't do a very good job, i.e. what's happened here. So we go in and we drive out to the middle of this big grassy field. There's nothing out there. And this creek, I swear to you, is like 6-7 inches wide. And there's a big oil pipe like 150 yards away. Huh. Except it's like a 12-foot diameter pipe. We're sitting there looking at this thing like, we've never seen a pipe that big. Like, what is that? How many thousands of gallons a second is pipe, of oil can they be doing? This, it's huge. It's 12 foot tall, it's 12-foot diameter. So we start getting the gear out to explain what a backpack shocking unit looks like. It has
it's like Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it looks just like Ghostbusters. Literally, we're wearing waders. We got gear all over us. It's got car batteries strapped to it. And there's a tail behind us and this weird wand-looking thing in front you hold and you point. And then they had cameras and we had QACI cases. We had all this weird equipment, okay? That if you weren't in our field, it'd be very hard to tell what it does.
Yeah.
Like even our water monitoring system, all this stuff. So we start setting up. Instantly, like 12, 15 guys around us with guns, like AK, all this stuff, surrounded us, screaming at us what we're doing. And we're saying fish survey. And they're looking at this little creek, this little ditch, and looking at us. And there's finally the guy comes out, the main guy.
There's no fish here, dude.
yeah, they weren't believing it. Because they were just as scared of us. Because we had broken onto this compound with all this gear.
Had a turnkey, right? So you were
all
and
this.
You guys look like
no
Ghostbusters.
Nothing. So the main guy comes out and he takes all of our phones, he takes the camera, and he takes all of our licenses and goes away. And he's gone for like an hour. And we're just out in this field with these guys. And these guys are freaked out, and that's freaking us out. And finally, the guy comes back and he gives us our licenses. He deletes all the photos off the camera. And he gives us the camera back. And he's like, well, the survey, we caught a hold of the old site operator. He told us, yeah, you were supposed to do the survey. And he never informed us that there was a survey on this land. And we didn't know that gate was there. So we're asked, the survey is now canceled. You will never be doing this survey again. And we're like, yes, sir. We're good. So we left and we're there for 18 days. We're supposed to do this survey. Like 4 or 5 days later, we were like, let's just drive by and see what the thing is. Because we were on the backside of the building, the backside of this giant compound, but no idea. Go to the front side, it's a Hadron Collider or one of the particle accelerator things. Yeah, we broke onto one of those on accident.
Where is this?
Holy shit.
Illinois. That's all I can say.
Oh.
Are you under a NDA because of the sensitivity of the area that you were at?
No, it's with a
Or
lot
you just
of
don't want
stuff
like the
we
fish
did.
beds coming back.
A lot of the stuff we did is still being used for legal massive court cases. So we're not allowed to talk about a lot of the stuff in the areas we were in and stuff like that until the court case's ruling is final.
Wow, I had no idea that there was one in Illinois. That's wild.
I had no idea that there's something called like a fish surveyor. Like you almost, I'm probably just as surprised as those guards were. Like
They
to
were
see
not
these
believing a
people.
word we were saying.
No, if
I don't
you just
blame
told
them
me
either.
that, I barely believe you right now after you told me.
Sound more like kind of like a fish taser. Like you're just going around and electrocuting fish. Is that the gist of the gig? Is shock these
really.
fish?
You wouldn't be surprised how many people think that. So the amount of electricity we're putting in the water is they're not actually getting knocked out. They chase the positive end of the electrode.
Oh,
So
okay.
they're swimming at the positive. You net them while they're swimming. And you put them in a live
okay.
with you, and then you count them, weigh them, and then put them back. 99% of
because-
all fish go back alive.
The way
Dude.
I was thinking was earlier, you're like, oh yeah, we survey the overall health of the river. I'm like, it's got to drop significantly after you tase all the fish.
it's like, well, they're all dead.
And you would not be surprised how many people think 99% of the stuff we catch goes back alive. It's kind of weird. Generally, the smaller fish do better in these surveys than the bigger fish because it's all about the mass. Electricity, when it hits these fish, it hit me and you in the water hits a lot harder. You'll see little fish that are still swimming through the electrical field like it's nothing that me and you would hit and it would, we'd break our teeth by how hard we'd bite on them.
Wow.
So do you think that 12-foot in diameter pipeline, that probably would have led straight into the facility?
So that was the thing. That was the donut.
Oh, that was the actual circle, the collider
We
itself.
snuck on. We didn't sneak on. We got onto the back side of it.
That's so crazy.
Holy
We're looking
crap.
at the back end. Well, there are probably 150 cameras back there seeing us unpack this truck with all the Ghostbusters gear.
They're like, what are these guys
I mean,
doing?
seriously, think about those guards. They're ready for. I'm probably ready for all kinds of terrorism.
Dude, you
And
know
then
how
they look
lucky you
out,
are?
and there's 3 weird guys in wetsuits with pulling out equipment out of the back of a truck. They have no idea what it is.
Yo, Justin, you were very lucky that they sent the guards to you and not the dogmen. Because I've been I've been listening to some Tony Merkel lately, and it seems like these government facilities are just guarded by they're talking about dolphin people, dogmen.
Because we went
Yeti.
right at noon. If we'd have been in the evening or the morning, we probably got.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, they wouldn't have, he wouldn't have looked at
Unbelievable,
your credentials. He would have just
I just love the how easy it is to sneak onto a large Hadron Collider base too, by the way. Just come through the back door. That's
And I
all.
may be using the wrong. It's the small particle accelerator. It's not one of the great big huge ones.
Okay, not a large, but a small
Yeah.
particle. Okay, but
And
still,
I don't even know if that one, because that was a discussion after we were on Tony's show if that one's still in operation or not, and I don't believe it is anymore.
on the books.
Yeah, on the books. I think local communities found out what it was shortly later because they never. Here's the thing: is that place, and I can't name it. That place was a lab that got bought out by the government, but never made it public that they got bought out.
Oh.
So they
interesting.
kind of were trying to operate as being it's still a giant biology lab or just a science lab, and they were trying to keep operating that it wasn't government now because it was.
How far are you from this base now? Like, were
I
you
can't say that
traveling a
'cause
long
you know
distance?
where I am.
Well,
Oh.
okay. So more so, the question that I'm interested in is there any part of you, in a very hypothetical way, in a fantasy scenario, where you would maybe, if you were writing a work of fiction, had an interest in going and seeing if this base was still in operation?
I know they changed the fence about a week after we were there, so that
Oh.
gate's no longer there.
Oh,
Huh.
But no, I mean, if I was ever out in that area, I would drive past it again just to kind of see if it's still there or not. because it's
Interesting.
it's very close to civilization. Like it's not in the middle of nowhere. And
It's
that's
hidden
why
in
people have
plain sight.
problems with it.
Man.
So how does this all end for you? Eventually they just, you're sitting there for a long time until they get the A-OK that it just was scheduled but wasn't announced. They cancel the whole thing. You go home. That's the end of that saga. You don't have any more
No,
interaction with this.
it was because we were legally allowed to be there because the survey was I can't name. Okay, the survey was from a pretty high authority, so legally we were allowed to be there, and then they had to argue it out, and then the survey was canceled officially. So there was a lot of arguments between two different big groups, because the one group needed the survey to go through, and the other group didn't want the survey to go through, and we were just the idiots on the ground.
Just zapping fish, dressed
Yeah,
like Ghostbusters. Insane.
How important is it to count fish? Like that agency's like, we got to count these fish in this tiny stream, and they're like, listen, we're trying to change the course of the past and also the future with this, so we're a bit at odds. I think you need to go away. Wow,
I think fish are lower than muddying up the timelines. So you that's a very interesting story, and definitely sounds like you were really lucky to have been at sort of the you're at the sort of the butthole of a a particle accelerator, and things went pretty decent for you. Could have gone a lot worse. So before we get into these cryptids, I would very much like to know what got you into cryptids, because obviously here you are, you've dedicated an entire show. How many episodes are you in? I think you go by seasons, right? And you're in like season.
I think we're like at 215 public episodes.
Nice.
Right. So
here's a fun fact for everyone listening. This is episode number 7 of Nephilim Death Squad. So according to some statistics, that means that if we make it past 7 episodes, we'll have a successful podcast. So we're coming after you.
There you go.
That's why we booked another one tomorrow immediately, so that we can get straight over the hump and just keep going.
Yeah.
But I mean, your episodes are hour to 2 hours long, so you're looking at I forget what the number you just said is, but you're in hundreds of hours.
Probably
of
about
content.
600 hours total.
That is, you ever stop and think about that? Like, there's 600 hours of me on the internet just talking the craziest shit that anybody's ever heard. And one day I'm going to die and people are going to look back and go, what the fuck was this Ghostbuster on about? But like, there's got to be a moment where, or a series of moments that lead you to be interested in cryptids. Was it something that you were always interested in from a child, or was it something that you stumbled upon and it just lit the fire?
So I've always been super into lake monsters. And I always wanted to be a biologist growing up as a kid. And lake monsters, and you'll hear when we get to the list, there's quite a few of them on there. But I did end up having a Bigfoot encounter when I was a teenager, which will probably be a story for another day, because we don't have time for that.
Well, that's how crazy this show might be, that we're just going to gloss over the Bigfoot story and go with the next thing.
No, please, but the short version is I seen basically the silhouette of one when I was about 17 at our family farm with my dad and my brother. And I still didn't believe in Bigfoot for probably 3 or 4 years after that, because I was getting ready to go to school to be a biologist, and biologists don't believe in Bigfoot, and that's wrong. I now know that's wrong, but going into school, it's what you're expecting to know. Now you see these TV shows and all that, and that really helped.
Yeah, but when you saw this silhouette, you went, water cryptids are still where it's at, dude. Like,
it's because the ocean, we just discovered a brand new species of whale just a couple of years ago, and it's 70 feet long. It's weighs as much as 5 semi-trailers. So
Jesus. The
ocean and these big bodies of water are much easier to hide something than you think than in the, these woods out in the middle of Ohio. But it's, it's not true. I worked with endangered species. I went out and I found we had one survey where the government said we would not find this species, and we found it. So we found it's called extirpated. They're locally extinct when we refound them. So they're now back.
Extirpated? What is it? What's that?
locally extinct is what it means. So let's say the animal has a really big range of where it lives in the world. It means, but extirpated means it's extinct in this whole part of its range.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. I understand. So then let's get into, you sort of have compiled a list for us.
Mhm.
I asked for
Before-
essentially your greatest hits or the things that you found to be the coolest, because you asked me what I wanted to talk about, but you're the cryptid guy, and I want to hear about what excites you, specifically
question,
about
though.
cryptids, though.
I got a question before you start. So like a lot of people are of the belief that cryptids might be just like animals or different kinds of things on the loose. Some think that they're spiritual, like Nephilim sort of thing. Some think that they're interdimensional. Where does this fall for you? Someone who's a biologist, who's like, because you're not looking at it the way we would. We're looking at it for fun. Like, this shit is really cool. There might be a dog man or, you know, a giant gorilla, but you're looking at it as like part of your job. So how do you see these guys?
Well, if you look at the definition of the word cryptid, it kind of has three major components to it right now. The actual definition of a cryptid is an animal undiscovered by science. So the okapi is a good example, you know, relatively recently discovered by science, but the locals have been talking about it for, you know, thousands of years in Africa. The home of the okapi in the Congo rainforest is called the Valley of the Giraffes. And they would say that there's these giraffes that live in the rainforest. And everybody's like, there's no giraffes that live in a rainforest. And it's the okapi is the only other living member of the giraffe family. They live in the rainforest. They're super secretive. They're humongous mammals. You know, we're talking about the size of something, you know, the size of about a moose. That they're out there, and we didn't find them. And I believe it was like 1960s, 1950s. Well, the first one we ever had, silverback gorillas. The first actual documented silverback gorilla was in the early 1900s. But you know, locals are they're everywhere. You know, they're just out there. You got to go out there. You know, they're in the rainforest or in these scrub, you know, forest. So that's kind of that first one, is this undiscovered animal. The other one, the next definition, is an unextinct animal. So that's like the coelacanth is a good example of that. This big prehistoric fish went extinct, you know, 65 million years ago. And then the people off of Madagascar be like, yeah, we catch them all the time. And then they're like, no, you know, and then it was actually, I believe, I can't think of her name. It was a female biologist, and she was pretty famous for this, rediscovering that. Pigeons. Juan.
Shout out to Juan. Shout out
Juan,
to Juan
you-
Ayala.
I
The
love
pigeons,
Juan.
they recharge on the power lines. Is that what's going on? We've never seen a baby pigeon. Is that what's going on?
There's baby pigeons in the backyard right now, Juan.
I don't believe you unless you have pictures. Look, I do want to show Justin something. I just sent it to our studio, our production room chat, and I would love to get an actual biologist's perspective on whatever the hell this thing is. So give me a second. I'm gonna bring it up. But we've got a lot of different things about this, or I have at least this morning, from a chicken to a monkey, and I want to believe that it is a tiny hybrid creature. And I know you're gonna dash my dreams upon the rocks, and I'm fine with that. But I do want to get your opinion on it. So let me just boom and boom. There we go. Okay, so let's scroll down a little bit. Top, are we seeing this?
Yeah, we're on.
Okay, cool. So let's pull this back and check this out.
انه شويه شعر على راسه، صحيح شعر طويل بس مو هالقد هذا يعني. هذا نوع بيقولون النسناس، هذا نوع صغير ما بيكبر يعني، بضل قد الشبر او اكبر من الشبر بشوي، واحيانا بيكون اصغر من الشبر كمان. شوفوا هلا هون ملبسينه ثياب وعم يرقدوا وراه، على اساس انه هذا هو القزم. شوفوا ليكم، هذا تابعوا معي فيه للاخر.
I got it. It looks like a monkey. Somebody said it was a monkey. For those of you who are just listening, you have to go to YouTube to see this spectacular. That's kind of weird. Wait, is that a monkey?
What the
Okay.
Monkey in a wig.
Monkey in a wig? Come on, dude. That's not just a monkey in a wig. Somebody said it's a fucking Pokemon.
Yeah, I can see that.
Top, what do you think? Is that a monkey in a wig?
I don't know what that is, man. That brings up a good question. Like, is a cryptid, like classically what we consider a cryptid would be like a species of something. This just looks like some kind of like freak, like some like Nephilim freak.
It was
Now,
in
there are
Iran.
Yeah, I mean, the grainy photo and somebody screaming a different language. Before I forget real fast, the third type of cryptid
Oh,
is
I'm sorry. I put on a monkey in a wig for you.
I will forget here in a second. That's how my brain works. The third type of cryptid is a misplaced animal. So like here in Ohio, we have kangaroos seen a lot, and in Michigan right now they're having an emu problem. So if you don't know if it's fauna that's from somewhere else, that if you're an emu in Australia, you'd know what an emu is. Yeah, but if you see one running through the woods of Michigan, you'd be like, "What the hell's that?"
Wait, you really?
No.
You're not joking? There's kangaroo in Michigan? Is that what you're saying?
No, kangaroo are seen a lot in Ohio. So kangaroos and wallabies can actually handle the cold pretty well. Like wallabies are taking over a big chunk of the UK right now. They're a real big invasive problem. And a small group of emu got out in Michigan, and now I believe the flock is like 24 members. There was like 4 or 5 of them got out originally. It's like their third
Is
year.
this a escape from a zoo issue?
A private zoo, yeah. So, but that's the third type of cryptid, is an animal that is documented that is not where it's supposed to be.
Right.
So what do you make of the idea of a cryptid that is of considerable intelligence, something that's much closer to us, especially when people talk about Bigfoot and things like that, they say when you look in its face and its eyes, it's like looking into the eyes of something that is sentient or something that's almost human. Sure. And this idea that they are not restricted to this plane or this realm. Do you subscribe to any of that? Do you entertain any of that?
Yeah. So the paranormal and the scientific, the only real difference of them right now is understanding. We're calling everything we don't understand at all paranormal, but really it's all the same. Whether you want to science, 100 years ago, we're talking, this is magic right now that we're doing 100 years ago. You tried to tell somebody we're going to be sitting down 3 different places, talking hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away from each other with all these people watching and listening. Yeah, right. That's not real. That's not. So this interdimensional aspect to the animals, I do think there are some animals that are interdimensional. Here's the question. Are they from here? Are they a part of what's called our biosphere? So a biosphere is our family tree, our tree of life. Everything that's from here is connected. We share DNA with plants and animals and fungus on our biosphere. So the question is it from somewhere else and it's hopping over to our side, or vice versa? Is it something that came from here that has the ability to access another dimension or even a pocket dimension? So there's this whole thing, and we just talked about it on our show a couple weeks ago, called hyperevolution. Sorry, my Wi-Fi is bad. We don't see it very often in our biosphere. And what hyperevolution is an animal will keep evolving. And I don't believe in the whole theory of evolution. That's cutting hairs, though. Some good examples are some crustaceans. They have survived several mass extinctions, and they've gotten to the point where they've started to evolve really weird things that are breaking the laws of physics. So you guys ever heard of mantis shrimp and pistol shrimp?
Yeah, they're the ones that can lock their claws into a position, and then it sort of snaps out, and upon impact creates a tiny shockwave of sorts, and knocks out their prey or their
the mantis shrimp, the drumming mantis shrimp, have a hammer that is cocked back. They hit so hard and so fast, it creates an implosion underwater. It's at the same explosive payout power of a 22 caliber bullet with no acceleration. So it's highly impressive. It actually breaks our current understanding of the laws of physics. So it's one of these things where it's magic because we can't explain it with science, but we can watch it happen. We can see that they're doing this, but it's not traditionally explainable. The other one is the pistol shrimp, which if you've ever seen a pistol shrimp, they're tiny little shrimp-looking creatures. They have one really big, heavy arm, and the rest of their body's really small. And they have a claw that cocks back like that, and when it uncocks, it shoots a jet of superheated water that cooks their food alive internally. I believe it's a couple thousand degrees when it hits. It pretty much fries. And these guys are very small, though. We're not talking about something the size of a lobster. We're talking about something you could fit several of them in your hand. So these are examples of animals breaking the traditional understandings of the laws of biology and the laws of physics, to where they're hyper evolved. So if we're talking about this on a bigger scale or bigger animals, they can get to the points to where they start looking like from the outside, they're breaking down the laws of physics, but they're not. They've evolved to take advantage of these new niches, these new resources, these new abilities, whether it's to hunt. Let's say you are popping in and out of dimensions, or even just kind of sidestepping. If you're sidestepping 1 foot here, 1 foot there, and we've heard that talked about with Bigfoot and Dogman and some of these other beings, that'd be a hell of a way to hunt. It'd also be a hell of a way to hide. If you want to believe more traditional literature with Sasquatch, most of the time they're going to take the hiding route over the confronting route. So how many stories have you heard? And we've had plenty of people in our show to where they're watching a Sasquatch, this 8-9 foot tall being, this muscular being, disappear. It's not there anymore. Where'd it go? Did it sidestep? Some people say that they have the glimmer, like they're, camouflaged. But the whole thing is you don't have to exclude the two. Science and the paranormal can walk hand in hand, I guess, is the really long way of saying that.
Maybe it was actually you, because I listen to so many podcasts and it all kind of melds together. But this idea of when you look at a speaker that's turned up really high, especially a bass speaker, and it vibrates in such a way that it just kind of becomes a blur, right? And it'll also bend sort of the metal of the car, where not in a permanent way, but the metal will actually begin to wave if it's subjected to enough bass from the speaker. And so the idea that maybe there's a mechanism at play with maybe Bigfoot where it can generate something like you were saying, infrasound or something like that, where the surrounding foliage actually starts to visually mesh with it when it emits this thing, because it's vibrating and it causes its surroundings to vibrate, and then it all kind of blurs together or fades into one thing, and it becomes very hard to see them. And also maybe that's the same mechanism that's at play when people say that the growl that's emitted by some of these cryptids causes paralysis in a way. There's such an intense level of fear, and they can feel it in their chests and in their bones and in their, throughout their entire body. And I know that crocodiles can do something. I think it's crocodiles can do something like that, where you'd be surprised the magnitude of the noise that they can make, and it's enough to shock you.
Yeah,
right. Or like a big cat when it growls. A lot of the times, people who have experienced that will, describe sort of a paralysis. This such a fear that it locks your whole body up, and so it's interesting to think that that could be generated by a natural biological function, and that it's not necessarily it doesn't have to be a technology. It doesn't have to be, like you were saying, magic. It's just a form of biology that we don't understand, and it's still operating within our physics, but we just don't understand it yet.
Yeah. And then with infrasound, it can create audio and visual hallucinations. It can create suicidal and depressive thoughts in humans. The suicide cliffs in California was recently finally explained, and they had to move a bunch of stuff. I don't know. You ever heard about those?
No.
So the suicide cliffs are famous because a bunch of people jumped off them on the coastway of California. But it wasn't just suicidal people is the thing. People would be driving and stop to get gas at a gas station right there on this highway, and they just walk off the cliff. And, they'd be there to just pump up their car. Like, they'd leave everything. So it's very odd. And finally, they figured out the way that the cove is centered, it was actually creating a giant infrasound pulse that people that may have been more susceptible to this were getting hit hard and actively killing themselves. And there's been some examples of people being around elephants that have experienced high levels of depression because of part of the way elephants talk was with infrasound. They actually talk with infrasound through the ground.
Do you think it's the vibration itself that would cause that would affect the person? Or
it's screwing with your brain chemistry. It's messing with you. We're electricity piling bags of meat. So we are very susceptible to vibrations. We're wetware, so the same stuff that you see affects animals and affects the environment affects us. But yeah, So infrasound is this weird thing. And you talk about with Bigfoot, all these people getting hit with the fear and peeing themselves or running away or freezing. And you
Hey,
said,
can I ask you something before
Yeah.
we move on? Because you might be able to explain this to me. How does the moon affect us in this way? Because I'm not quite sure that it's vibrating, but it's definitely pulling.
So tidal force. So tidal force is a little weird. I don't know. I'm not a big believer that it's super affecting us, besides maybe the psychology side of it. And I'm not a psychologist. I can just tell you what our bodies are. You are never absent from the push and pull of the moon. The cycles of the moon do not affect its push and pull as far as with us directly. Now, the moon is fake, okay? Juan.
Maybe.
It's Juan. Shout out Juan Ayala.
The
Wait,
moon is
I
definitely
also
fake, but whatever it's doing is, I don't know. I feel like
it's absolutely fake. Yeah. But before you get away with it, because I could feel we're going someplace else, I have this thought in my mind of sleep paralysis, or the times that people experience paranormal entities, and especially in the paralysis, there's often this deep vibrational electric kind of current sensation, and it's also accompanied with a tremendous amount of fear, dread, like doom, mortal doom, and it's a very unique feeling, because in waking life it's very few and far in between that you're going to experience that level of doom. I've experienced it myself, and I've also been in crazy situations in life that have never provoked that kind of an emotion from me, and yet this buzzing sensation, this electrical vibration, whatever you want to call it, a lot of people describe it different ways, but it all sounds like it's the same thing, will also be accompanied with this feeling of doom. So you have this presence of some sort of frequency, right? Like we're describing with the infrasound. And you also have it being accompanied with the sensation of doom or extreme fear. But yet it's coming from a source that isn't tangible, that's not, there beyond you actually snapping out of the paralysis and having whatever
this
the
is like,
hallucinations or.
remember the story I was telling when we had Juan on? They did the testing, like the emergency broadcast test.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had actually put my phone in a Faraday box, and I went out with my kids to the trampoline, and we're just like jumping on it, looking up, and all of a sudden, all the cicadas in the tree start just vibrating in unison, like vibrating the tree. Where my daughter was like, she thinks that there's bees around. That's how like intense the buzzing was. So I get out and I go to my house because there's contractors there, and the second that I go up to them, their phones start boop, 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 going off with the emergency broadcast that they were like sending through. So I was like, that's really interesting that to me, it appears like it's traveling in like a wave, like an actual wave, and then picked up by their phones. Yeah,
it's a wave.
Exactly. Well, we don't see it.
Right.
The bugs reacted to it. So
like,
for weird.
The sleep paralysis, I think the sleep paralysis thing is like 3 or 4 different things we're categorizing. I think some of it probably is our own brain chemistry playing tricks on us. But I do believe in the entities too. I do believe something is going on there screwing with us. Whether you want to believe it's aliens or interdimensional creatures or demons, it's really take your pick at that point. None of them are really good.
Disembodied spirits of the Nephilim.
There you go. I was going to say, where's Juan at? Or where's Joel at? And then for the cicadas reacting, we know our radio, cell waves, and television waves affect insects flat out. That's the hival collapse syndrome in bees here in the U.S. Here's something all you people may not know. Every species of bumblebee in the U.S. is endangered.
Really?
I guarantee almost 90% of you have not seen a bumblebee this year. Not a carpenter bee. They're different because of hival collapse syndrome.
That is interesting. We were just talking about that, like an episode or 2 episodes ago. Coupled that with this idea of Einstein saying that human beings have X amount of time left on the planet if anything should happen to the bee colonies. That's a really bad paraphrase of what he said, but it's clear that bees are integral to our survival on this planet. And we were also talking about frequencies disrupting their flight patterns. And what was the terminology you used for hival breakdown or something like that?
Hival collapse syndrome. And there's a lot of evidence pointing it's actually cell phones causing it, to where they're using the same frequencies to try to travel and communicate with each other, and they're getting lost. So there's all these colonies that the workers leave and they just never find their way home. And bees have remarkably good navigation. These animals have been around for quite a long time and have done very well, to where now almost all of the flora of the planet rely on them in some way, shape, or form for reproduction. And to more of this man-made horrors, they are now making pollinating machines because parts of our country, not in the world, parts of our country are no longer having pollination. And have you ever seen, there's these giant feather machines that just kind of bat around the leaves and stuff like that, trying to get the pollen to spread, because it's so incredibly hard to do for people to do it. It's almost like, there's this thing made to do it in nature and they're all gone for some reason. But no, it's odd. I feel like I forgot.
You just blew my mind when you said that, because I was thinking about this whole summer. I was like, I didn't see one goddamn bee, like the big ones. That's actually
I
quite
actually
alarming.
have a hard time differentiating between a bumblebee and a carpenter
yellow
bee.
jack.
Well, because I know down here we have like these giant, horrifying bees, but they actually burrow into the ground. They're not bees at all, and they have like a striped black and white abdomen, and they're absolutely massive and horrifying. But I don't think that they're the bees that we need. So we can probably get rid. How come we're not disrupting like the flight patterns of wasps and hornets and those fucking monstrosities?
We should be disrupting the flight patterns of Jeffrey Epstein's plane, but we
There you
can't seem
go.
to do that.
There you go. No, it's just about how their systems work. Wasp and hornets are much more visual. They have, if you look at their eyes compared to their bodies, they have gigantic eyes. They're using that. They're not traveling as far away from their hives either. These guys are carnivores. They're not obligate carnivores where they're only eating meat, but they're mostly eating meat of, other bugs, meat. You see a dead animal, wasp in the summer up here in Ohio are all over it. And bees are, eating pollen. They're catching pollen. They're actually eating nectar and making honey out of that.
So these other things are carnivorous monsters.
Do you think this is a concerted effort? Or do you just think it's one of those things that happens because we're using alien technology?
I think it's just one of these things that happen that when you don't care. The Industrial Revolution proved that, like, Ohio horned serpents is a cryptid. They were so regularly seen in the Ohio River pre-Industrial Revolution that they would talk about them in ship's logs as almost like landmarks. They were these big, long, 60-foot long serpents that had either 1, 2, or 3 humps on their head. And that's why they're called Ohio horned serpents. They're not talked about in fear or revile or myth. They were talked about as it's seen in an animal. This second, pretty much the Industrial Revolution started in the Ohio River, gone. Every one of them gone. And we see that a lot with hyperspeciated species, where they really specialize in something or they're really sensitive to environmental change. They just leave or they die out, and we talk about that a lot. Like you look at eels left too. So I think it's just what happens when you forget that you're just as much a part of the environment as that bee or as that Ohio horned serpent.
All right, so we know that you think some of these things may be interdimensional. That's still on the table. We know that you suspect there's probably something to these paranormal entities, sleep paralysis, things of that nature. We know that our cell phone frequencies are turning the bees gay. So let's get into this list that you have of your favorite cryptids, because I think it's definitely at that stage in the podcast where I'd like to hear that.
All right. So first things first, let's talk about Bob. Bob's not technically a cryptid. Bob is so fungus are actually much more intelligent than mushrooms are much more intelligent than anybody gives credit for. We did an episode a couple months back about arguing about fungal intelligence, and they're passing some cognitive tests. They're actually using them in computer chips right now because they do processing power much more efficiently and better than any electronic ever. We're integrating them in. That episode just came out for us yesterday.
Okay, I got to listen to that shit.
How are mushrooms passing cognitive tests? What cognitive tests can you expose a mushroom to that it's going to perform in?
The quick and dirty, because these are very big, long experiments that we could talk about each experiment for several hours. But basically, the first one is we figured out they could count and they could manage resources. So they would hoard off food that was close to the main body. So When you see a mushroom above the ground, that is the sexual body. That is like the fruit of the giant mycelia network underneath the ground. Mushrooms and fungus themselves actually look like, imagine you took a big bundle of wires and cables and you threw them on the ground. That's the actual fungal body underneath the ground. It's this big, almost like a neural network.
Right.
The
And this is
mushroom
the
you
thing
see
that they,
the sexual organ.
and they're communicating across vast expanses with this
Vast.
giant mycelium
Yeah.
construct. Okay.
So an individual strand of mycelia. So mycelia are the big bundles, the big cables. The individual strands, the individual string are called hyphae. So hyphae are ungodly tiny, and they're able to do such amazing things. And mycelia are also very amazing. But anyways, before we get into that, so they figured out they could count. What that means is they did both resource management and stuff. So the mycelia, the fungal colonies, would wall off food that was closer to the main colony's body. So they'd wall it off, and then they'd go out to eat stuff. And basically, how they figured out they could count is they had, let's say, 4 pieces of food they had blocked off. Researcher went in, removed one, took it out of the equation. Mycelia colony counted, and like, oh, wait, I only got 3 pieces of food. So then it walled off another one. So it wanted to have 4. It always wanted to have 4 pieces of food when times got hard. But it would spread its body way out far to feed, and it wouldn't feed right away close to it. So that's showing levels of intelligence. You can argue how much intelligence, but that's showing levels of intelligence with resource management and the ability to count to at least 4 or 5. Raccoons can count to 6. Ravens can count to about 10 or 12. So we're already talking about certain levels of animal intelligence.
How high can a lobster count?
Huh?
How high do lobsters count?
Lobsters can't fucking count, dude.
They
Can't count at all.
They're kind of immortal.
Fuck you, Raven.
What kind of shit?
There you go. I gave one for both of you.
All right. Yeah, please continue.
Pick a
This is
side,
amazing.
damn it.
I just love helping. Just love helping out. Yeah, so they could count. And they also figured out, they put them through a stress test. So they mushrooms can actually intercommunicate between different species. So not their own species of mushroom, but they can communicate with other species of mushroom and pass very complex information off. And we're not really sure how they do this. We just know they do this. And here's how I'll tell you how we know they do it. They had a box with about 15 colonies of different species of mushroom in it, in this basically big box of dirt. They put this box of dirt through the worst heat and drought there, where most of the species died. Maybe 1 or 2 survived. Then they had this giant box with about 100 or 115 species. And this giant box was like mushroom paradise. All these mushrooms in this never knew any hardship. So they were pretty much living in ease. They took the survivors from the apocalypse box and put them into to the paradise box. And then they turned the paradise box into the death box. So with the first death box, like 95% of the mushrooms died. The second death time they did the death box with the big colonies, keep in mind, most of these colonies have never experienced a day of hardship. 95% survived.
Wow.
So that shows that this colonies that survived the hardship, they figured out how to resource water, how to resource food during these extreme droughts and heats. They went over there and they told everybody, hey, this is how you survive this. We figured it out. Here's how we need to do. And they all did it. They all survived with flying. It's so much dramatic. And it's Dr. P. Money from the Miami University here in Ohio that did those studies. And like I said, that's the very simplified version of those studies.
They're going to fucking kill us.
If they wanted to, they would have done it a long time ago.
I agree. Yeah, it seems like they're trying to help us. Like, mushrooms just have great benefits all around.
I think we're just a blip on their screen.
It's so crazy.
I think because the oldest complex fossil we have is a mycelia network. It's about 500 million years old. And it's a complex mycelia network, and it's very similar to the ones we have today. So they were that complex 500 million years ago. So they've just been chilling.
So we're just extras on the mushrooms show.
We're just the next guy in line.
Incredible.
Now, Bob.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What is Bob? Please explain Bob. What is Bob?
Bob is the single largest living organism ever, as far as we can tell. If you kind of squished his body together, he's 2,200 acres, squared. So he's insanely big. He's actually an entire state forest Sorry, he's actually an entire state forest out in Oregon is on his back. Bob is a honey mushroom. He's a pink honey mushroom. So how we discovered Bob is they drilled in to do a core sample in the 1900s in this forest, and 100 acres of trees died the next day. So mushrooms, actually, we used to think it was more of a democracy, trading back and forth resources, but now we know it's more one-sided. Mushrooms have the ability to integrate into plants and control them and insects. So Bob actually controls the entire forest on his back. He's integrated his mycelia and hyphae networks into the trees and is running them. But it benefits the forest too, because he keeps a perfectly healthy, sustaining environment. So through now soil sample evidence, we found out Bob systematically kills sections of forest on his back to promote grassland growth to re-nutrify the soil. And he does this like a big clock.
It's very scary because you're describing that if the mushrooms did take over, it would be a dictatorship and there would be a lot of genocide. And
We would already be dead. I'm just telling you, we'd already be dead. They'd have got rid of us a long time ago if they cared.
All I'm saying is we can't wait. That's too much power for one entity. We have to do something about this before Bob decides that he's had enough.
He's 45,000 years old, estimates, put him on. He's 45,000 years young. He's got two sisters. The one's 25,000 and the one's 15,000 years old. They're not nearly as big as him, but they're still substantially large. So for here in the U.S., healthy soil per square inch should have 6 meters of mycelia network, or like it's like 600 or 700 feet or 600 or 700 miles of hyphae.
Wow.
Per square inch. Mushrooms are the giant the world wide web is actually mycelia networks. They're in the bottom of the ocean. We found them in both the ice caps on the planet. We found them in the upper atmosphere. They're everywhere. Fungus rule the world, and you're just living in it.
What do you make of this idea that we're always cautioned against, and I'm certainly not giving anybody advice to eat mushrooms, but you're always cautioned against eating any mushrooms that you find out in the wild. And it's my opinion, an entirely uneducated opinion, that caution is very hyperbolic. Like the percentage of mushrooms that will actually kill you it's like upper 90% are edible and won't kill you. Maybe will make you a little bit sick, but won't kill you.
There's a big range in the middle. They are not good to eat, but they won't kill you.
Okay. That's much fairer.
Big section in the middle. The problem is it really depends on what species of mushroom. Me and my wife go foraging for mushrooms and stuff like that. And I believe mushrooms are actually sentient. I think you're fine to harvest them. Just put them in a burlap sack or, potato bag so the spores can spread. That's the fruiting body is what it's supposed to do, spread spores. As long as you're helping them spread spores, I think you're okay. But when you, what was I saying before that? Oh my gosh. That's how you can tell.
Bob was going to turn on us and he's going to eventually infect us and we're going to have a mass, what's that movie? The Last of Us, where cordyceps mushrooms take over our corpses and turn us into rage monsters. I think you were just in the middle of the rage monsters part.
Cordyceps like insects and vertebrates because they need them as a part of their reproductive cycle. Mushrooms are really weird with that stuff. But no, if they wanted mushrooms, good. Yeah, mushrooms are good. Oh no, sorry, eating the mushroom. That's what we were just talking about. The problem is there are, when you go out and forage mushrooms, you got to really know what you're doing, because some of them, like here in Ohio, we have green scale mushrooms, which will just make you sick. Like you eat them, you're not going to enjoy eating them, but you're not going to die. But then we have devastating angels that look just like them that will kill you, and it'll suck the whole time you're dying.
Wow.
So the problem is there's not a lot of middle ground. There's like diarrhea or painful death where blood's coming, like blood for the devastating angels, like blood comes out of your eyes and your ears and you kind of turn to gel. Don't eat them. They look really similar too. That's the problem, is these big family groups. Mushrooms, hundreds of thousands of species of fungus. So you have like morels are a big popular one where I'm at in Ohio. False morels are really easy to tell from normal morels. False morels are toxic, but not to the level where you're going to die or anything like that. It's going to suck if you eat one. Don't get me wrong. or jack-o'-lanterns look like chanterelles here. And jack-o'-lanterns are also another toxic one, to where if you forcibly kept them in your stomach, it would kill you. Your body won't let you. If you eat a jack-o'-lantern, you'll know pretty fast you ate a jack-o'-lantern. Your body will forcibly remove it.
What if you took a bite of Bob?
Bob's edible. Bob's a honey mushroom. You can eat them. They're good.
All right. Bob's the
People
man. I'm
harvest
not mad at
chunks
Bob.
of Bob every year.
So, okay. So we have Bob, the absolutely massive living network of mushrooms with a forest on its back. Now, let's move past Bob. What else is on the list?
So Trey's Alps giant salamander. Have you ever heard of this?
Oh, I've only heard of giant salamander in the context of like Dungeons and Dragons video games that I used to play, where you would fight them in cave systems and they would have swords and armors. And I don't think that's what you're talking about.
Maybe. Maybe. No.
So let me tell you, I've seen a picture, and it's probably what you're talking about, like a salamander that it looked like it was bigger than a man.
So you're talking about the Japanese giant salamander, which is probably a cousin of what we're talking about. So it's a cryptid. It's never been proven to exist. It's in the Trinity Alps, California. Cool thing about this, it was seen a lot in the 60s. It's been seen for hundreds of years, but mostly in the 60s. Almost all of the sightings were from herpetologists. So herpetologist is a person that studies reptiles and amphibians. So it's a highly credible sightings, to where it's a guy that's researched giant Japanese salamanders, for example, is one of the guys that had seen giant Japanese salamanders, looked down on one of these crater lakes in the mountains, like, well, that's a giant Japanese salamander down there. And the U.S. is missing, that part of the U.S. is missing its giant salamander. So this whole northern hemisphere has had giant salamanders. The European one just went extinct relatively recently. And you know, the giant Japanese get 6 foot long. So the giant Chinese get 6 foot long. They get to be about 100 pounds. Canada's reported. You ever heard of a Canadian alligator? Is another cryptid that's associated with this. It's very salamander-like. These guys aren't pushovers either. You know, giant salamanders are pretty active predators. Don't get bit by one. It would suck. And if you're a small child, they will drown you. You know, we're talking about, you know, the same size as a 6 foot alligator. It's, you know, it's not a small, weak animal, but you hear the word salamander and you think of something that looks like a little lizard.
Chop, are you pulling that up? Because I was actually about to do the same thing.
Yeah, I'm just looking at what he's talking about because he's blowing my mind here.
So the giant Japanese salamander, you look up, they're carrying pictures of them. They you know, and they're bouncing back. So the problem with the Trinity Alps giant salamanders, I think it still exists. We're going to do an expedition for it in a couple of years. Because I was a biologist, but I actually know a couple of the best herpetologists here in the U.S., and we're all going to go out there and catch this thing.
Hey, what sort of terrain are you looking in again?
It sucks. It's the Alps. It's the Trinity Alps.
Holy crap, dude!
No, I'm bringing
that. Not only is it, it's also dangerous, isn't it?
Oh, there's a lot of bears.
And apparently giant salamander.
I'll deal with the giant salamanders. I mean, yeah, so that's a giant Japanese salamander.
Dude,
Yeah,
I love it.
That's about a medium-sized one.
Dude, it's holding a Ninja Turtle.
So this is the inspiration of the Kappa. Have you ever heard of the Japanese folklore cryptid, the Kappa? That's the inspiration for him.
Oh, the sort of turtle man with the
the water
on his head.
Yeah, so that's from Japan. It's the cryptid that it's the animal that inspired that.
Oh, so you don't think that the Kappa is real? Because I heard not long ago a Kappa encounter.
I do think the Kappa is real. I think there's other things too. I think what is traditionally viewed as the ancient Kappa legends, and they've changed a lot now. When we're talking about ancient Kappa, I think it was inspired by the giant Japanese salamander because they would take a child. You know, these are like alligators. You know, when there used to be thousands of them, now they're very endangered. But I think that's what inspired it. Now you have this whole thing with it loving buttholes and trying to steal your orbs out of your butt. That's literally Kappa lore right now.
What they love, they steal, or we have
They're
orbs
trying
in our
to
butt?
steal
I don't
your
know which
soul
question is
out of
first.
your butthole, and they hate cucumbers.
Dude,
They're like
man,
cats.
let me tell you, the freaking like international cryptos kind of suck. Like what you just described to me stinks. The chupacabra kind of sucks. The gin, I don't even know what that does.
The U.S. has some bad ones too. Like, we're allowed to. Anyways, the
Hey, you
Yodova.
can say whatever you want.
You say whatever you want, man. Go ahead.
Yodova dick monster out of Florida.
Hey, yo.
The what?
Yodovo dick monster.
I don't know about this one. Tell me about this.
Is it he?
Seen in Daytona Beach, Florida. It was like a dinosaur mixed with a giant penis and testicles. That's what
No,
you.
wait a
There
second.
you go.
How was that?
Top.
Wait up. I need to know everything about it. Where did
Because
they
we're gonna
see
go
it?
hunting the dick monster.
We're definitely going to do that.
Oh gosh, but no. So yeah, there's some bad
You-
cryptids in the U.S. too.
What do you know? What do you know about the? Do you know anything else about the adobo dick monster?
It was only
Adobo.
seen for a summer, and it was seen all around this one Walmart by Daytona Beach.
I'm just getting food. I just Googled it and it just came up with food with adobo. What did you say it was called?
It's
Adobe?
Adobo, Adobra. I can't remember. It's something. Cryptid Wiki has it. You just look up dick monster, you'll find it.
We do have cooler ones though.
He
Because
just tried to get me to Google dick monster. This guy's
just
guy's
look up dick
hilarious.
monster.
But type in Cryptid Wiki after.
Okay.
You were saying before about the chupacabra. What's interesting about the chupacabra is like the transformation that it went through, because in like old Mexican lore, the chupacabra was much more of like an alien, and I believe it had like
Puerto Rican.
spines, it had reptile skin.
Yeah,
Puerto
Pablo.
Rican, not Mexican.
Puerto Rican, Mexican. Are we talking about Juan again? He's not in the chat anymore, I don't think. But all of a sudden it
yeah, very different.
transforms into a like a dog with mange.
So we did we did a couple episodes on that. The Puerto Rican chupacabra is completely different than the Mexican U.S. chupacabra. And there's about a 6-year gap. And it's because that the Puerto Rican chupacabra got so much news feed that there was a weird thing seen in Mexico. So they just gave it a Spanish sounding name that really has nothing to do. Like the Mexican one never sucked blood, never did anything. It killed goats, sure, but it mostly killed chickens. Same with the Puerto Rican chupacabra. They killed very few goats. But yeah, that was the big thing. Is the Puerto Rican one was even seen to have wings a couple of times. They're very different things, with American TV wanting to slap the same name on them because it was catchy.
It is a great name.
we ruined
it. Is that still being seen?
No, the blue dog one is, yeah. It's probably a Zulu dog.
What's a Zillow dog? See, this is
Zolo
you're just
dog.
like
You ever seen the blue hairless dogs in Mexico?
oh no.
Type in Zolo dog or Zulo dog with an X. They got like a mane, they got like a little mane, but they're blue skinned, blue tongued. It's probably a hybrid or an ancient relative of that dog.
I see them. Kind of looks like Anubis.
Yeah. And it's
That's
probably
interesting.
that mixing with coyotes. Yeah, that dog's native to Mexico, so it's probably that thing mixing with coyotes getting it. It's not a common. They're very expensive to try to buy one now, like as a breeder. But they were a Mexican breed, so there's these wild populations of dogs that have those traits of being, hairless skin, blue, Yeah, then they look like a little monster, and they have fangs.
I get so
Wow,
upset.
yeah, look at his fangs. This is crazy.
He does. He's got a little. He looks like a little vampire deer.
Yeah.
I always get so upset whenever they reference dogs as being blue, and then they're
Dude,
fucking never
you're
blue.
blowing
They're
my
always
mind
gray.
right
I
now.
know. They're never blue. They're purple.
He's blowing my
purple,
mind
gray.
because like you're just coming out here very casually saying all these animals that I had no idea existed. First, he comes on here and talks about his job, which I never thought existed. Now you're just casually telling me like half the cryptids I believe in, like this is what they are, and I'm like, looking, I've never seen this thing, but I could understand why some Puerto Ricans would be freaking out in a field if this guy started eating their chickens, right?
Well, I'm really going to blow your mind with the next one.
Okay, I'm excited.
Well, we know what the Mongolian deathworm was. So I got an animal for you that the Mongolian deathworm is. So let's talk about the Mongolian deathworm. They're not big. They were never in any of the historic sightings ever said to be large. That's more of the modernized movie versions of them where they're, fairly big. But the biggest account, pre-1950s was like 3 foot long. Most of them are 1.5 to 3 foot long, bright red in color, no eyes, big open front mouth. They have the ability of electrical shock, and they can spit venom. They can spit a very corrosive acid or venom towards their prey or as defense. Yeah, they don't look like that. Most reports never said they had teeth. They were very dangerous, and they were not found in the open deserts of Mongolia ever. No ever report. They weren't found in the sand. They were almost exclusively found. So Mongolia actually has tons and tons and tons of wetlands and swamp. They were found on the border regions between where the swampland would meet these forests or the deserts. They were never found out in the desert. They were never found fully in the swamp. They were hanging around these borderlands. So if you're talking about a burrowing animal, that makes a lot of sense. You know, the soil is moist, but it's not drenched. You know, it's not super dry. It's not Mongolia gets cold at night. You know, it's not, you have this idea of the desert, but you see people from Mongolia, what are they always dressed up in? They have like 18 layers of fur on because it sucks at night. It's 110 degrees during the day and 12 degrees at night. So what if I told you there's a creature that's soft-bodied like the Mongolian deathworm, is bright red like the Mongolian deathworm. So they even said if you touch Mongolian deathworm, you would die. What if I told you it has a very corrosive venom on its skin or toxins? The Mongolian deathworm shoots venom at its prey. Sorry,
Sounds like
at its prey.
It sounds like you're describing the pink thing that comes out of my dog, but go on.
Of course. So shoots venom at its prey or as a defensive mechanism. This animal does that too. The only thing it doesn't do is the electrical shock, but that could be explained with static electricity in the desert. Because if you ever walk in the desert, you shock yourself a lot because of static electricity. We have even. Sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was going to say, isn't that not really that much of a stretch? I mean, we have electric eels. You've got a serpentine creature that.
Electricity is in stingrays, eels, fish, like all kinds of stuff. Electric eels are the famous one because they have the best. They're the best at it. But it's happened a lot. No, velvet worms. You ever heard of a velvet worm?
No.
So they're an ancient organism. They're also about 500 million years old. They're the only invertebrates. They're squishy. They look like gummy bear centipedes is the best way to describe them. They're big, fluffy, but they shoot their venom and their intestines out of their mouth at prey and predators. They're very corrosive. They're bright red. They can be all kinds of colors, but the ones we're talking about are bright red in color. They can be very corrosive to touch. And get this, they're the only invertebrate with complex social structures. And I'm not talking about ants where they have this caste system and it's all, one's reproducing. We're talking more like lions where they'll actually share in prey kills and they'll get an order of hierarchy, who gets to eat first and stuff like that. They'll take down animals much larger than them. You should pull a picture up for people for that one. A velvet
say
worm.
That name again?
Velvet, velvet worm.
Mm-hmm.
There's dozens.
That's
of
interesting because I get the sense that based off of the description and certainly based off of the cartoon image that we initially brought up, these are the things that like get snowballed through the imagination into things like Tremors, right? Or like the giant worm creature from Star Wars and things like that. It's like these are the origin stories of sci-fi fantasy creatures.
100%. So here's another crazy thing that connects the Mongolian deathworm to velvet worms. So a lot of the reports of Mongolian deathworms, and they come in all shapes, colors, sizes. Some of them you can hardly see their feet. Yeah, I wanted them for pets for years. Sorry, what was I saying? The reproductive cycle. So Mongolian deathworms are often said to reproduce in death. That when you kill one, babies will burst out of it. Okay, that shows the live bearer. That they probably, if you did kill a Mongolian deathworm, it was probably close to giving birth anyways. Velvet worms do that. Velvet worms give birth to full-size velvet worms. They don't lay eggs. They pop out like mammals, little velvet worms. Wow. So if you're talking about, our biggest velvet worm we have documented, it's like, 7-8 inches long. The biggest Mongolian deathworm historically reported is 3 foot, before we got to the, industrialization movies of making these things. Oh, the squonk. I hate that thing.
It's hideous.
That's the painting above my head.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what that is?
Yeah. It's a squonk crying.
It's a little hideous, sad cryptid, a very strange one. That one feels like it's not natural, like it escaped from a lab somewhere.
I can explain the squonk away too if you really wanted.
Yeah,
I like the squonk.
But the velvet worm is a good analog for what could be the Mongolian deathworm. They have a lot of the similar traits. They have all these things that connect. And it just shows that velvet worms are very misunderstood right now in science. They're extremely rare. They live in really weird environments, a lot of transitional environments, a lot of stuff that's really hard to study. like the Mongolian death worm. We're living in a world of two extremes, the hot and cold. And that's what these velvet worms are really good at. They live in these weird areas to where there's extremes being meted, but it's also really hard to research.
Saw this video the other day of somebody on the beach where the tide was coming in and out, and they put a fish against the sand, and all of a sudden this worm came out, and with a sort of a Leatherman or
Hobbit
something like
worm.
that, dude, that thing, when they pulled it out, it was like 4 feet long or something like that. They pulled it straight out of the
Up to like
sand.
19 feet.
Dude, it was absolutely horrifying.
Bobbit worms.
Do you know where those are indigenous to, so that I never fucking go there?
The ocean.
Yeah, dude, what?
Don't go to the ocean.
No,
God
pretty
damn
much.
it.
There's a similar creature pretty much in every beach and every part of the ocean. Whether you're cold, hot, it doesn't matter. There's a bunch of stuff that live in the sand. We are walking on living sand, like sand moles and stuff like that. They're constantly everywhere. You are walking on stuff that is moving all the time
I don't
underneath
like
your
it. I don't like it. Now I
Where
know that's it's like with the ocean, you're just better off
Don't go in
not
the ocean.
thinking about it at all.
If you don't like it, that's always bugged me about sharks and stuff like that. That people complain about shark attacks and shark infested waters. No, there's no such thing as shark infested waters. The sharks live there.
Yeah.
If you don't want to go in the water with sharks, go into a pool.
Yeah. The
It's like
ocean
going
is,
into the jungle and complaining about the jaguars.
Yeah. I used
You
to
are
live in
going
Coney
where they
Island.
live.
So it's like the ocean is like, that's just a wild spot. Once you decide to step foot in there, you're like, well, whatever happens, happens here.
You are agreeing to step several pegs down the food chain every time you go in the ocean. That is the thought. We are cognizant enough to make that decision before proceeding, and people still do it. I used to shark fish in the open ocean, or on the beach and stuff like that. I've had big sharks around me. Never once really felt afraid of them, but I understood what the risk and everything like that. I've caught some big bull sharks. And some big hammerheads and stuff like that. So there's a lot of risk with dealing with these animals.
Do you guys remember the story about the family that went to some beach in Florida like 3 years in a row, got attacked by a shark 3 years in a row? Each member of the family.
Was it New Smyrna?
What was that?
New Smyrna?
Yes, I believe so.
Yeah,
so
New
that
Smyrna is the
Georgia.
shark bite capital of the world. You know why? Several species go there to give birth, including bull sharks. So what happens is you have a whole bunch of sharks that are half a foot long or a foot long swimming around, and they're hungry. They were just born, and they see your hand going by, and your hand's the size of a little fish. So they bite your hand, and then you move, and they're like, "Oh, that's a lot bigger than I thought it was," and they let go. And that's it. You got bit by a shark. It was a shark attack. It happens the shark was the size of your shoe, but it was a shark bit you. That's what happens in New Smyrna, and that's where I used to shark fish a lot. Big bulls would come in, both to give birth and prey upon other species. Seen pilot whales there once at night. That was very scary.
Yeah, when we were driving to meet up with you, Top, to go to what was that, St. Petersburg, we saw we're coming over a big bridge, and there was something. I think it was whales just right off the side of the bridge, breaching the water, and I was like, holy shit, and then I had to swerve and not crash. So let's go to, because we got 15 minutes left, and so you have a better handle on the amount of time it's going to take you per cryptid. So if you feel like you want to skip any, or if you feel like you can squeeze them in, but it's all the ball's in your court.
So what do you want? Do you want Nessie or do you want organic UFOs?
I want. Oh damn. Okay.
Dude, what? Come on, that's a layup. I think that's a layup. Nessie is an old, dirty, washed up cryptid, right? I knew it was gonna hurt Justin saying that.
Well,
we've had our time with
I gotta
Nessie.
go, guys. Have a good night.
See, here's the thing. I agree with you about Nessie. Nessie's kind of boring, but I feel like what Justin's going to tell us about Nessie will make us more interested. But then you said organic UFOs, and now I'm like,
really kind of.
That's what we kind of got famous for there for a while.
All right, look. Does Nessie lean towards the, what is it? Something with a P, the dinosaur species.
It is okay. A plesiosaur is a marine reptile, not a dinosaur. I'm sorry.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah, and
So
no,
sorry. I'm sorry. My apologies.
no, it's a fight me and Jay have all the time. It's nothing to do with you.
How dare you?
I just stepped into some baggage. I felt it.
Yeah. Nothing to do with you. It's just the guy that sits in the other chair next to me 8 hours a day. It's a fight we have often.
All right. Look, Top, I say, what do you vote for? Do you vote Nessie?
God, this is a tough one.
Okay,
know,
how about this? We're gonna let fate decide. We're gonna we're gonna do one round of rock, paper, scissors.
I think there's
If
a
I
delay.
win, no, there's no delay, dude. Don't worry about that.
All right.
If I win, it's the organic UFOs. If you win, it's Nessie. All
Okay,
right.
let's go.
1,
Rock.
2. Now there's a fucking delay.
Wait,
Dude,
what the
no,
fuck
you
is
never
this?
opened your
Hold
fucking
on.
hand, dude. That was bullshit.
Because here's the thing: a lot of people say rock, paper, scissors says, and then you shoot. And some people go
What?
rock,
Says,
paper,
says.
scissors.
Where are you from?
I'm from New
Dude.
York. This is what I mean. There's a cultural divide here.
And that's why you
Dude,
say
I was
last,
45
right?
minutes south of you in New Jersey. We never said says. That's not even a
Rock,
it's
paper,
rock,
scissors,
paper,
says.
New
scissors,
Jersey's
shoot.
its own country. I'll tell you that.
You know what? I guess you
That's
win this
unbelievable.
round because I'm from a really fucked up place.
Yeah, I agree with that, dude. Let's go organic UFOs because I want to hear
All
about
right.
organic UFOs. And that movie Nope really did an awesome job with the organic
Hey.
UFOs thing because it's like right in front of you the whole time, but it's something I never considered seriously
got-
until I watched that.
Our first episode months out before the trailer even came out for that.
We stole your idea, son of a bitch.
Well, I'm just saying it's not. It's an idea that comes from the 70s, but we probably have done the most research that's publicized about it with the most detail. We've probably done about 15 hours publicly on it. And
All
we
right, can you boil it into 15 minutes?
Yeah.
You have 10.
and no, I mean if we go over a tiny bit long,
Yeah, I'm fine with that. It doesn't
whenever the
matter.
wife starts yelling in the other room is when it's time to go.
Me too.
So how do you start this? Do you start with sightings that you would consider lend themselves to organic UFOs?
Yeah.
Is there?
So, I think the UFOs are a big category, right? You know, it's unidentified flying objects. It's anything. It's anything that's up there. This is about 5 to 6% of UFO sightings, in my opinion. Where they have these weird characteristics that kind of stick out to mean they lean more towards an animal versus or a thing, a living thing versus, you know, a piece of machinery, interdimensional stuff, whatever. You know, it's just there's a small category we're talking about. Let's talk about the largest environment on the planet that has been the least researched, the upper atmosphere. So we live in what's called the troposphere. It goes to about 10 miles up, okay? That's the smallest part of our atmosphere. It's very, very tiny. The next, so right on sitting on top of that, and that's not right at where they meet. It's in the stratosphere, which is the next layer. But on just into the stratosphere, there's the ozone layer, which is like our radiation shield. So above that, you know, we thought there's all this story that as you go up in the atmosphere, it gets colder, 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 right? Well, that's not fully correct. It gets colder, 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 colder till you hit the border where the ozone is. And then it starts getting warmer again. And the hottest part is where the stratosphere meets the mesosphere, which is the next layer above the stratosphere. So right in that section of the atmosphere, it's like 45 degrees and there's a bunch of liquid water available. So there's this massive, the biggest amount of surface water on the planet is in there. And there's this massive environment we haven't researched. So in 2019, NASA did a series of studies to where they built these things that are similar to what I used to use called heterodendes. So a heterodende is a microbe in bug hotel, essentially. You put them in the environment. They have little tiny gaps that range from, you know, millimeters, micrometers tall to, you know, several inches tall. And the life gets in there. There's food and it's, you know, safe from other things. So you get an idea of what's all living in the environment. So they want to do these high altitude studies. And these biologists were expecting to find, you know, maybe a maximum of 14 species of plant, animal, fungus, whatever, you know, any kind of life, maximum 14 species. They put these things up there. And when they bring them down, they actually find like 4,000, 5,000 species of everything. They found, and they did this several times, they found a representative of every biological clade except vertebrates. So that means there's a jellyfish cousin up there. There's a mushroom cousin up there. Bacteria, algae, plant. Everything is up there that is on the surface and in the ocean, which would make sense. You know, we have representatives. So there's this humongous untapped, and then COVID hit. So they stopped doing the study, you know, but that's going right into COVID. So they haven't continued the study, at least publicly. So they hit just the edge, just the lip of the stratosphere, and started finding mass amounts of life, species of everything. And so there's this whole thing. So the early rocketeers going into the stratosphere, the mesosphere, for a little bit, there's these reports that they'd hit, for just a second, they'd see it on the windows, green slime. And they thought it was an atmospheric anomaly, like was something was leaving the atmosphere and stuff like that. They'd hit a green slime. And then it'd burn off, really quick because they're moving pretty fast. It actually is more likely now that they were hitting gigantic algae pockets, atmospheric algae, which is the basis of, all environments on this planet. Every major environment is algae, these small single cell, even single cell organisms. So it seems like they were hitting these giant, and we're talking hundreds of miles wide, 2 miles thick pockets of algae, because the atmosphere goes all the way up to over 6,000, or goes all the way up to 6,000 miles. So we got a lot of space. And then once you get to like the exosphere, it's pretty much segregated gas. It'd be very hard for something to be living up there full time. How does the food get up there, though? How does the original stuff get up there? Now, what happens is these inversions of our lower atmosphere from the troposphere. So wind and all this stuff is pushing what's called detritus. Detritus is just a big fancy word for crap in the air, whether it's dust or organic particles, anything like that. It's called detritus. We have a bunch of species in our environments that eat detritus. They specialize in eating detritus. So what happens is when these detritus hits, these wind-filled detritus hits these mountain ranges, they shoot straight up and they actually punch a little hole in the border of the troposphere and the stratosphere, and they get pushed up and they get stuck up there. A lot of these early studies actually found ground flies up there. That's showing that something the size of a fly can get shoved way up there. They die, and there's even found some seeds and stuff up there. So that's a good source of food. It is extremely similar. It's extremely similar to the open ocean. By that, I mean there's no hard surfaces and there's extreme pressures. So where you talk about the open ocean, the deep ocean having extreme dense pressures, pushing in, this has the opposite pressures pushing out. It's less pressure on the body than what we'd be used to. So that's kind of this first basis of just the borderline of life being up there. So far, and this is the really, really quick version. So far I pointed out to you, there's algae up there, just like the ocean, and there's little microorganisms like the open ocean. So all we're missing is the whales and the sharks. I think that's what we've talked about. There's all kinds of UFO sightings of giant jellyfish-like creatures, these giant these sky snakes, these space worms, all these creatures. And then my favorite is the disc. I think a lot of these silver discs you see are actually living creatures. And me and Tony on a show, Tony was picking on me about this. Tony Merkel was picking on me about this. I said the Tic Tac video was probably an organic creature because the way it was playing with the pilot. I don't know if you guys have ever experienced a dolphin playing with a tugboat. They go in front, beside, they screw around with them until they get bored, then they leave. They're so much faster and more maneuverable than the boat that they kind of play with them until they get bored and they leave. That's what was happening with that fighter pilot. It's on the side of him, it's in front of him, it's behind him, it's beneath him, it's above him, it's screwing around with him, it's letting him lock targets on him for a second, then moving. And then when it gets bored, it goes 6,000 miles an hour and just shoots off. So these are hyper-evolved organisms from the upper atmosphere.
So are you saying potentially like the discs, for example, immediately if you wanted to chalk that up to an organic organism, what comes to mind is, the various shelled species of the ocean. It's sort of
I personally am thinking fungus. I think they're a type of fungus. They're a hyper-evolved fungus. Because there actually are some mushrooms that their tops will be, I'm trying to remember common names. They are like shelled almost, where they're like hard as steel. And we're talking about something that would be extremely hard for a vertebrate or a fish to do. But an invertebrate or a fungus that doesn't have the same organ systems we do could do these speeds and these maneuvers and not, rip themselves apart on the inside. And a lot of this comes from one big, and I didn't put it down, but there was a pilot in a mesa out west, Colorado, I believe. He landed his plane. He took him and his buddies out on his plane and landed on top of a mesa which is these big, tall pillar stones. And they get up there and they're having a picnic. They wanted to spend the day up there. The whole day, up in the upper atmosphere, they're seeing what looks like glitter shining back and forth. They're just like, that's weird. Eventually, this thing comes crashing down on the mesa with them. It's about 4 foot in diameter. It's got a silver top shell and a silver bottom shell. And it's where it's opening along the sides. You can see what they assumed were eyes and little pieces like tentacles. It had a chunk missing out of one side of it. And he said, as best as he could describe it, it was bleeding. And it was bleeding this gold, silvery, what looked like liquid until it hit the ground. Then it was strings. Just like hyphae, mycelia.
Oh, yeah.
It was making noises. And it was glowing. It had spots on it that glowed. It had bioluminescent spots. And they watched this thing for like 20, 30 minutes making noise, and it was dying. And they're like, they don't know what to do with it. It's not like any animal they've ever seen. Then about the 20-minute mark, this giant one that was very similar comes cruising out of the sky and grabs it and takes off. And they were very happy because they thought it was the mother of the thing coming to save it. I think more likely it was the predator, the main predator that was hunting these things, the silver, they're dodging it, and it found it because they're very shiny. And you think that would be a disadvantage, right? Being very shiny. Well, if you look at the open ocean, a lot of these animals that they hide in plain sight are extremely shiny. They're reflecting all the light they can. It works very good when you're in the open ocean environment or the upper atmospheric environment where there's no structure. Not really good when you're laying on a brown mesa and the light's beating down on you. It's really not that hard to find you in that environment.
Hey, have you ever given any credence to the theory that maybe Gray's aliens, interdimensional beings, may actually be riding these things?
So we just did an episode a couple weeks ago where we think the U.S. government has caught some of these or is using pieces of them for their silent black helicopters and that kind of stuff. I think the Greys are a whole different thing. Like I said, the UFO phenomenon is a vast thing. And the UFO encounters are a vast thing. I think the Greys are more along, Joel talks about them being the Nephilim or Nephilim meat suits or whatever. I don't know what the Greys are. I know they're not good. I don't think they need to ride anything. I think they're more of this interdimensional power thing to where I think their UFOs, personally, and this is just a belief, are not real per se. It's a altered perception for us. It's putting on a show. They're not. They don't need the craft. They don't need technology. They're putting on a show for you.
Yeah.
Just because they think that's what you need to get over whatever they need to do.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that's kind of the short. And there's all kinds. And we're working on a book coming out about it. Hopefully next year the book will be out with all these encounters. There's hundreds of encounters we have written down about these guys with all the different types of organic UFO being seen. And once again, it's a very small percentage of UFO sightings and encounters. A lot of it, like MUFON, for example, nothing against them. Anytime a tentacle is mentioned with the ship, most of the time they throw out the sighting. They just get rid of it because it doesn't fit what they're looking for. They're looking for more of the nuts and bolts, the extraterrestrials. That's what they want. So they are looking for that information. Like there's we found a whole series of ones that groups, not MUFON, but MUFON-like groups, have thrown out in Canada to where this disc was making a wheezing noise, flying very low and erratically, dragging behind it what seemed to be two tentacles on the ground. Like its tentacles had rolled out and was dragging it. And we think it was one of these animals that was injured or sick. It's in the process of dying. It's not flying very high or very well. Its arms, its tentacles are hanging out and dragging on the ground. You see these animals towards the end, especially the open ocean animals, they struggle. They struggle towards the end, especially if nothing gets them before then. And then some of these, like the giant jellyfish and the manta rays, are humongous, talking 6, 7, 800 feet long, 200 feet tall. Everybody's asked what happens to their bodies, when they die up there, right? There's a big carcass. The meat showers, the star jelly events, they've happened for tens of thousands of years, been reported. They happen all the time where these undescribable chunks of either jelly or meat fall out of the sky over sometimes, 15 miles long. The Kentucky meat shower in the 1800s, they were eating this stuff. There's still a couple jars of it preserved in the Smithsonian. It happened. Dude, it was 4 counties.
It's manna from heaven, right?
Yeah. It was a giant jellyfish that died up there and fell out of the sky.
Whoa.
So that's the short of it.
Dude, I am like fully enamored. Like
Yeah.
I am considering this on such a high level. Like you know, as I said before, the movie Nope really did kind of present me with something that I was peripherally aware of, but never considered seriously. And then it was honestly a great movie. And when it was
I
done, I
like
was like, man, that is a great angle to consider. You know, just the idea that they're organic, but the whole fungi and jellyfish angle of it is super compelling, super compelling. And then combining it with things like the whole Kentucky meat shower and things of that nature, and then also the reflective properties of so many creatures in the ocean. You know, why wouldn't sort of as above, so below? Why wouldn't that be mirrored
Hmm.
in creatures that inhabited the sky? And because that is a good question, right? It's like it's so reflective. How is that good camouflage? Well, yeah, you'll pull fish out of the ocean that are look like they're made of pure silver, polished silver,
exactly.
you know?
It works.
And
It's a
so,
camouflage for them and their environment. You pull them out of their environment, sure, it doesn't work. Same with the green tree frog
dude,
in the desert. It doesn't work.
absolutely incredible. You guys are writing a book on this, or you
Yeah,
wrote
hopefully
papers
it'll be
on
out
it?
next year.
Now,
I'm not a fast writer.
Justin, real quick, theoretically, something that would inhabit the upper atmosphere like this, do you think it would have the density to kind of like attack something like us? Like if it did come down, would it be able to even
We're
do
talking about
anything?
them eating people, and I don't
Right.
think it's happening very often. And it's all about cost reward effectiveness with food. Uh, we are not very nutritious and we're very heavy.
Yeah.
So if you're a flying organism, and we've talked about, we don't have enough time today, but to go into their biological systems of proposed flight or propulsion, they can't afford to take on a lot of weight without it being very nutritious. So for them to eat us would be probably not the best thing. The same with the reason great white sharks, they do attack people every once in a while. They don't ever eat them. They actually have an organ in their gum line that they actually detects fat content, and we're not fatty enough for them to digest. It's like eating celery. It's worth less to digest than not digest. Juvenile great white sharks eat stuff like fish and stuff like that. When they get bigger, almost 1/3 of their body weight's their liver, and they need fatty foods. Seals, dolphins, that's mostly what they're eating. But a dolphin will just turn just as fast and eat them. They need blubber. They need these animals with that kind of stuff. So for these upper atmospheric creatures to be preying upon us, I don't think it happens. But if you watch the movie Nope, that's one of the things they showed is it got injured. That's what it's proposed. It's kind of linked in the early on is it was injured and they developed a food source with that guy giving it horses. So it got lazy, it couldn't go back up in the upper atmosphere. It couldn't leave. So it kind of got stuck and was eating whatever it could catch. And we see that with all kinds of animals across the planet. Tigers, when they get injured, I can't remember her name, but there was a tiger that's killed almost 3,500 people. And she killed a whole village. She got injured, and that's just how they react. They change. When an animal's hurt like that, it changes. Same thing with Bigfoot, same thing with you and me. When you're damaged and you're threatened and your life's on the line, you change. The stuff that we've viewed as morality can change very fast. On average, I'd say they're probably not eating us because we're not very nutritious and we're very heavy. The average human is getting heavier and heavier and not any more nutritious.
Very,
man,
very interesting.
it is. It's fantastic. And it reminds me of so much of like sort of Dungeons and Dragons lore, where there is constantly this example of a highly evolved form of fungi. And you'll find it in so many video games too, where I forgot what game it was in particular, but you're able to ride these things. They essentially do look like giant floating mushrooms with these long tentacles dropping down. And so science fiction, in my opinion, very often is ahead of the curve. It's people who are willing to think outside the box and explore these ideas mixed with a little bit of art who often come to conclusions that the rigid scientific community at large wouldn't come to because they have a lot of reasons not to go there. And there's certainly no shortage of examples of my head as you're describing these things is just popping off with all these images that I've seen and all these video games and all these movies and everything. Like there's been a long history of lore, the underground mushroom people, the giant mushroom people, all these different things. Honestly, this was unbelievable. I feel like there's I started to pick up on this midway through. I was like, we could ask this dude anything, and he's gonna have something for it. Like I really felt like that. I genuinely felt like that. It was absolutely awesome. As weird as this sounds, this is how high praise this episode is. I'm gonna show this fucking episode to my mom. I'm gonna be like, Mom, you have to learn about these fucking mushrooms, man. This could be what's happening right now. This was absolutely awesome, dude.
Well, thank you guys for having me. I do appreciate it.
Oh, dude, thank you for coming on, man. This is, again, yeah, I'll probably show my mom and my wife because I was trying to explain Bob to them like an idiot, and I forgot where I heard about Bob. So now it's on my show, I'm sure.
I think that was Tony's favorite part when we did the episode with him.
Oh yeah,
dude, that whole organic UFOs thing, that was definitely mine.
Thank you for joining us. We'll talk to you soon, but we're gonna let you get out of here, and I got stuff to do too. So we'll catch you tomorrow. Who are we gonna be on with? My Family's Crazy. What's his name?
Yeah, we're gonna be with Mark Stevies from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. He'll be coming on tomorrow. We're gonna be discussing Atlantis and the Nephilim. Before we go though, go ahead and let everybody know one more time where they can find your work.
Yep, Justin, Cryptids of the Corn podcast, all podcast platforms, Facebook, Instagram, all that fun stuff. Cryptidsofthecorn.com. It has all of our stuff as well. Yeah, we're pretty easy. All right, thank you guys again.
Of course. Guys, don't forget to go to subscribe on Nephilim Death Squad on YouTube, and also go and follow our Twitter account, because we launched a Twitter account. We're trying to build that, and ultimately we'd like to stream Nephilim Death Squad exclusively on the YouTube channel. In order to do that, we got to kind of funnel everybody from top side of the game, my side of the game, into the corral that is Nephilim Death Squad on YouTube. So if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and do that for us, and that way we can stop streaming on 7 different platforms or whatever it is that we're doing right now. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you for joining us and giving your time. And until next time, guys, take it easy.
Peace out.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real. If you can persuade people that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see, you got them. Because they'll laugh in the face of an explanation that portrays the bigger picture of what's happening. And they have.